Hello, this is Jerry Mitchell, and we are back with another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. First, we have President Trump deflects FEMA questions after deadly Texas flooding. Well, FEMA is something we can talk about later, but right now, they're busy working, so we'll leave it at that. I guess they said once in 100 years they've never seen anything like this. Posted by Donald Key, and that's a cross post from the Boomers Being Fools subreddit. And yeah, that looks like a clip of Trump talking about that to the press and saying that quote. And yeah, personally, I don't think you should be politicizing tragedies like this, but of course these days, everyone loves to politicize all the tragedies because, when Trump was, now that Trump's in power, of course it's the Democrats doing it, but back when Biden was in power, you saw them do it too with stuff like the East Palestine train derailment and all that. And yeah, that just goes to show you how, people never let a good tragedy go to waste these days. It's everyone uses whatever they can to push their agenda. And yeah, personally, I think the libertarian position is FEMA has been ineffective. It should be thrown out just like the rest of the alphabet agencies. And ultimately, what's going to save people from natural disasters isn't any government agency or the government itself, but rather people's own agency to save themselves and help others to save themselves if they want to. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have federal agents deploy brutal tactics in LA immigration riots from the Intercept.com, and that story is a pattern of violence, and now it's posted by Baton 13. And yeah, as I've stated in the past, the government can justify using whatever force they want against you, and ultimately, you might have no recourse since they have the legal monopoly on the use of force, and they control the court system as well. So, I personally don't really care for it, but that's how it can be sometimes. Then we have, anything to hide, Trump was on that list, from abcnews.go.com, posted by Nietzsche, and that's a link from ABC News. DOJ FBI review finds no Jeffrey Epstein client list, confirmed suicide memo. And yeah, I'm kind of pissed off about that. They were saying when they were running that they were going to expose all the Epstein's client list, but it just goes to show you that, when it comes to politics, a lot of times either getting stabbed in the front or stabbed in the back, and they just stabbed you in the back with this one. It just goes, it's probably because, there are probably a lot of members of the in-group on it in addition to members of the out-group, but, it just goes to show you, as George Carlin said, it's a big club and you ain't in it, so that's why I don't think they'll ever expose the Epstein client list. That's also because Epstein might have been working for Israel. I heard he might be worked for Israel CIA and Mossad to discredit the Western elites and blackmail them so that they would be supporting Israel forever. And yeah, that's something that I don't think they want to expose as well. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have, they're going to be deputizing members of the National Guard and volunteer Floridians to be immigration judges, posted by CH4Locks, and that's a cross post from the March Against Nazis subreddit. And yeah, I personally don't really care for that, but as I said, the government can justify doing whatever they feel like since they have the monopoly on the use of force, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it besides cope or cry online, I guess, but that's just a form of coping. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have spam text going out. My response was in green, and that's a post from Donkey, and that's a cross post they made to the Thomas Massey subreddit, and they got text from a number, it looks like 855-361-0437, and the text said, "Watch now, Thomas Massey turned his back on President Trump in Kentucky. President Trump banned sex changes for minors, cut taxes for Kentucky families, and secured our border, but guess what? Massey voted against President Trump's America First agenda. Join President Trump and fire Thomas Massey. Watch now, act.maga.kentucky.com/YVK4T. Stop to end." And then the OP replied, "Good, he's following the Constitution. Fuck off, keep that shit out of Kentucky." And I would agree with that. President Trump, a big problem with him is he can't tolerate any dissent at all. That's why he goes after anyone who dissents at all against him too much, like he did with Jeff Flake or Liz Cheney. And I don't really care for those guys. But Thomas Massey, he's sticking true to his libertarian principles, and Trump's not having that. And yeah, that's why I think you could try and do like the Rand Paul way of, going after Trump occasionally, but not getting too much on his bad side so he's going after you. But, Thomas Massey's too principled for that, and he wants to stick by his principles, and that's going to mean Trump's going to come after him. And yeah, hopefully it doesn't result of him getting kicked out of the House of Representatives. But if he does, he could always run for the Libertarian Party or the New America Party that Elon's setting up. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump announced his plan to put the farmers in charge of migrant farm workers from LatinTimes.com, posted by Donald Key. And yeah, as I said, ultimately the government has the legal monopoly in these force to justify whatever they feel like, and I personally don't care for it. But if they want to put the farmers in charge of deportations, that's on them. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have "We're experts in fascism. We're leaving the U.S." posted by Foreign Chimney, and that's a YouTube video from the New York Times. And yeah, personally I think everyone's tired of the whole fascism circle jerk at this point. If you want to think Trump's a fascist, that's great. If you don't want to think he's a fascist, that's okay too. But ultimately, people have been calling Trump a fascist or a Nazi for like a decade at this point. I remember SNL had a skit back in 2016 about how all Trump supporters were Nazis because they had one of them in like a Nazi armband. And that just goes to show, people are kind of tired of the whole circle jerk. I would argue that every U.S. president, at least since like FDR has arguably been a fascist. But of course, and with Reddit, they only care that the orange man's a fascist. They don't care that Obama was a fascist or that Biden was a fascist or that G.W. Bush was a fascist. No, they only care that the orange man is a fascist because they only care about the current thing. I'm sure when Trump leaves, they'll call the next president a fascist too, and they suddenly won't care about Trump anymore, but this new guy will suddenly be the worst thing ever. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Sweden chooses its economy over ecology, ending the green tax on commercial flight, from Yahoo.com. And that's an article from the Telegraph. Sweden invented flight shaming. Now it's begging airlines to return. And that was posted by Spare Simeon. They added Scandinavia wants to be socialist, but it can't afford it. And I'd agree with that. Just because I feel like ecology and green fascism isn't something that's talked about enough. Increasingly, a lot of government authoritarian policies are done in the name of the environment, and I think that's well-intentioned. But, just because something's well-intentioned doesn't mean it's automatically good. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. And, yeah, I personally don't really care for any form of government authoritarianism, and that includes green authoritarianism. And, yeah, I'm glad that they're ending the green tax and letting flights go come in there more tax-free, or at least with one less tax. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Carolyn Leavitt tries to cover for GOJ lies while Fox News calls them out over Epstein's client list, posted by Donald Key, and that's cross-post from the No Shit Sherlock subreddit. And yeah, I'm glad that someone's calling out the Trump administration over their backing off on the Epstein client list. They campaigned on revealing it, but it just goes to show you they were a stabby. It's just like when it comes to politics, it's often stabby in the front or stabby in the back, and they were just a stabby in the back administration, just like a lot of them are. And then we have Shaking in Their Boots, posted by Donald Key, and that's crosswords from the Age Like Milk subreddit. It's a tweet from Libs of TikTok. Trump says he will release the Epstein client list if elected. The Democrat elites are shaking right now. And that was from September 3rd, 2024. And yeah, that just goes to show you how, the Trump might say a lot of good stuff, but he'll back off and bend over to the elites whenever he gets the chance to, and that just goes to show you how, even if the media loves to market Trump as being this huge dissident, he's really more par for the course than anything else. He'll always bend over for whatever the elites or Israel tell him to do. And yeah, that's why personally was a big reason I didn't vote for him. Then we have This Is Why This Country Used to Be Great, hosted by Ragnar OKXG, and that's the meme. Freedom explained, you are free to have a gun, you are free to have a religion, you are not free to use your gun to take away the freedom of others, you are not free to use your religion to take away the freedom of others. And I would agree with that. Ultimately, I think if people want to justify whatever they want to justify, that's on them. But I definitely do agree that, if you want to have a gun for self-defense, that's fine, but you shouldn't be using it to force your yourself on others. And same thing with religion. If you want to have a religion, that's fine, but you shouldn't be using it to force yourself on others either. And that's my thoughts on that issue. And I think we're going to wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.